Welcome to Company Secrets, the Nutcracker Paradox. I'm your host, Jared Redick. This season, we are diving into the most enduring, profitable, and beloved ballet in the world, the Nutcracker. Every year, millions watch it. But how are today's choreographers and artistic leaders handling its complex history and its future? This is season 2. Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Stanton Welch, the artistic director who has energized Houston Ballet since 2003. Before Houston, Stanton was already an established international choreographer creating works for San Francisco Ballet, ABT, the Australian Ballet, and Royal Danish Ballet. He started training at 17, rose quickly through the ranks to leading soloist at the Australian Ballet, and built an international choreographic career, creating for major companies around the world. He's also been awarded the prestigious Order of Australia Award for his contributions to the arts. Today, we dig into his 2016 production of The Nutcracker. Not just the tradition audiences love, but also the cultural complexities of ballet's most iconic work. We'll explore how Stanton approaches these challenges and what keeps this ballet endlessly inspiring for him. Welcome, Stanton.
Thank you.
You've seen generations of dancers and audiences enjoy The Nutcracker. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you reflect on its place in ballet today?
Well, it's interesting. I think a Nutcracker for America is very different for Nutcracker for a lot of the world. So I grew up in Australia and danced there. And Nutcracker we did maybe once every 4 years. It was part of our canon, but not something that fell every year, or it wasn't even at Christmas. It may have been in the middle of the year. So then when I started training in America and then saw Nutcracker at this level, it was such a unique thing. And what I've grown to love so much about it here is the recurrence of it, the history of it, the bringing your family to see something that is traditional. And we all grew up watching the same TV shows on the same 10 channels. And there was a shared cultural, experience that we all had at Christmas. And nowadays, everyone's off on their own streaming devices and watching their own things. It's nice to have an anchor like a ballet where you bring your family multi-generationally, come and see it around the same time of the year. I really love that. And I love that ballet's a part of that.
I love your perspective on the idea of that shared experience, especially in the age of screens, like endlessness of screens.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at the Oscars and I think I used to follow them quite closely, and now I don't have all the streaming things, so I can't see some of the Oscar films. It's just so interesting. And we just don't sit around a water cooler and talk about Friends anymore. There's not that shared thing. And ballet is quite elite and not part of shared experience. So Nutcracker is kind of like our Marvel movie or our Disney, movie where people of all generations can come to. It's a really great watering hole.
Yeah, it's true. It is like ballet's Marvel movies. That's great. So talking about cultural complexities of the Nutcracker, the traditional Chinese tea and Arabian coffee diverts can be problematic in many productions. We certainly have had these conversations recently, most recently within the last 5 years, I believe, but certainly before that. How did you approach those dances in 2016?
Well, I made the whole ballet structurally that each of the diverts was a solo, a classical variation, and I based them on our most famous classical ballets, Sleeping Beauty, Don Q, Swan Lake, as far as taking those steps that we need in those works, steps from class, and making them very much a part of what the variation is. So that might sound a little bit dull, but really what I was doing was making the variation completely classical. So Chinese, all the port de bras comes entirely through classical motif. There isn't anything, physically about the shapes that aren't from our ballet class that we practice every day. And I based that variation very much around the Kitris and Capalias with the fast passes and traveling back and forth and the hops on point at the end. So I approached each of them like a classical vocabulary and made sure of the 7 of them, they all sort of accomplished all of that material for each of the dances. So in doing that, it wasn't like I was trying to take shapes and motifs or anything cultural. And because they are toys, they move in a certain way that is unnatural. So that was the approach of that. And then the costuming we based on the idea of when you used to travel when I was younger internationally, you had these dolls that you could buy from every country that was dressed in traditional clothing of each of those places. So that's what the costuming was based on, were those toys.
That's a great approach. And of course, if we think about the Tchaikovsky score and the divertissement in particular, if we're talking about what's traditionally considered Chinese dance, the music really indicates what steps are you going to use. You're talking about doing all those fast passes, for instance.
100%. And I mean, I think all those composers too, just like ballet, hadn't visited these places. They'd heard motifs of sounds. And from those sounds, or from that cultural experience that they had, they created their own world. So it's actually not the world, it's its own universe. Kind of like if you went and watched Flash Gordon or Star Wars, and all of those cantina scenes full of characters are all individual made up places, and we have to be able to exist in that. And the fact that they may reference something at some point. So musically, I think, that Chinese music is what Westerners perceive as Chinese music. Is probably not really Chinese music. A Russian man inspired by Chinese motif.
You're talking about the imaginings of those dances, basically, right? These are just people that didn't have a real perspective on what it was that they're trying to capture.
It was a postcard of imagination of a made-up land that they had never been to, only heard of, and they did it through sound, and we do it through dance. I think it's tricky, but I think certainly for me, I really tried to stay completely within classical ballet vocabulary.
That sounds great. I wish I could see the production, or hopefully I can see the production in the near future. Act 1 or Act 2? If you had to only keep one of them, which would you save?
Oh, goodness. That's impossible. I think as a dancer, Act 2. As a choreographer, Act 1, because Act 1, you have multiple places you visit, and you have, the snow music is crazy, wonderful. And you have the battle scene, which is also wonderful. Yeah, so I think as an artist, I wanted to make the Act 1. That was where I spent most of my imagination. But Act 2, I think, as a dancer, you get all the diverts, you get a lot of movement, you get the waltz, the flowers, you get the grand pas. So that's the appeal.
That's kind of where I fall on that as well. The Act 1 with all the narration and the storytelling, the richness, and you can or cannot go crazy in the battle scene. Like, how do you reimagine the battle scene?
Yeah. And every kid's fantasy. And it's also, we forget it because we hear it so much at Christmas, but the music is spectacular. It's goosebumpy, and it's not just one, number one track on the album. It's basically the whole thing. Like you can listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, it's such a gorgeous score for sure. As you know, the Nutcracker is usually the first point of contact to ballet and live performance for so many of our audience members. If it disappeared tomorrow, if Nutcracker disappeared tomorrow, what do you think would happen to ballet here in the United States? Because we've already come to the conclusion that it's different other places in the world.
Sure. I think that we would lose millions and millions from our budget. It is that much of a part of us culturally and certainly financially. I think we'd lose 40 shows of our show roster. It would be devastating. I don't know how you would make up for it other than dramatically reducing organizations or government funding. That's how the rest of the world, I think, predominantly fills that gap. And I think you see that a lot of those places will end up turning to this Nutcracker tradition, harnessing this financial thing that America has done so well. I can't even imagine. We did have it, because we had COVID and Harvey. So twice we had to face a year without Nutcracker, and how we survived it still gives me PTSD. But without it, I don't even know. Even in those terrible times, it still was an anchor for us.
Yeah, it still becomes that anchor point for so many companies. I wonder what that...
And for the audience, right? Like in their time of hardship, what do you want? You want your comfort food, and Nutcracker is that.
We all turned in that hard moment of COVID to the arts, to the things that lifted us up and that inspired us. And live theater, we were very sad to see it go away for as long as it did for that year. At this point in your career, what is your relationship to the Nutcracker?
I don't know if I mean, I love it. It comes back every year. There's a comfort to it. I love the opportunity for young dancers. So it's a great chance for young quarter ballet people or soloists to get opportunities. So it's actually an exciting time internally within the company. But then there's also something about doing a long road trip, right? Like it's the same thing. We've done it for years and we know we do it for a long way. So yeah, it's nice. It's not, I want to say it's autopilot, but it's not because there's so much going on. But I think it's a great time for planting new seeds and seeing who the next range of principals will be.
Yeah. In your production, we're getting close to your 10-year anniversary of your production. Do you make adjustments to the choreography every year, or it just is what it is?
A bit of both, I think. You get in a habit as a choreographer of, if it's not working, changing it, because that's that's how I feel my nature is, where sometimes it's not working, not because it needs to change, because they just haven't had enough rehearsal yet, or they went on the wrong leg, or whatever it may be. So I do try to keep a bit of a hands off while it's set so that I'm not constantly interfering. It drives the staff crazy, of course, changing everything. And then I'll come in and then, of course, make some adjustments. And I have this year been writing down a list of things, and some of them are financial or scenic, and some of them are steps. And also, you sometimes have to adapt to the line of the dancer. There'll be here this option or there's this option, and we have to find the one that fits you guys as partnership best. Yeah, does that explain that? That's hard. I try not to change it too much. I feel sometimes you can destroy your own work by constant redigging at it.
Yeah, I asked that question because we all know famously that Mr. Balanchine changed the roles for so many of his dancers. And then, of course, you have the Balanchine dancers who danced it under him say, this is the version, and then it evolved throughout his career. So
it's everyone. It's the joke when we were staging ballets in Australia, not for my ballets, my ballet master would always say, this is the 1993 version. Okay, so we're starting fresh. If I do it on the other leg, that's what it is. I mean, and nowadays too, we have video, right? So we're much more accurate about resetting things than I think we were when I was dancing. I mean, someone was doing it off their own little notes.
True. What is your most memorable note you've given a collaborator for any of your productions?
Collaborator? Oh, no. Well, I always laugh at the things we're saying, right? Like, we have to stop for the fairy dust, or we have to, there's a lot of weird words in Nutcracker that you hear coming out of your mouth. Can we all pause because the penguins aren't ready, you know? And then there's a little giggle inside out in your own head with those things. So I often find Nutcracker lends itself to saying some things where you're like, this is my job. I'm talking about the polar bear being not on the blue mark on the fourth count of, it's all those things that people imagine that we do and we're actually saying it at that time. But that would be my most fun. And Tim Goodchild, who did our Nutcracker, I really feel like a genius. I mean, from the scenery to the costuming, and he drew every single thing with such detail, right down to the pattern on a button, that I felt like his drawing's alive. And often with designers, you don't feel that. There's sort of, you see it, and then what you end up with is a third thing. But with Tim, it was absolutely what we saw. And I love that.
That sounds fantastic. I definitely have to make a trip down to Houston to see your production. It'd be so fabulous to see it. Well, Stanton, thank you so much for sharing your insights into your production. This has been a really, really wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Thank you. If you liked our conversation here today, you can follow Company Secrets Podcast on all platforms and on our website, companysecretspodcast.com. Thank you for listening, because the stage is only part of the story.